Hi, this is John McLeod. I'm a member of the pluralistic community that's organising this conference in June, the International Pluralistic Practice Conference. And today I'm having a brief meeting with David Denborough, who we're absolutely thrilled has agreed to be one of our keynote speakers. So I'm going to kind of hand over to David and kind of invite him to just tell us a bit about himself, and then maybe go on to talk about what he might be saying at the conference, kind of themes or issues he might be addressing. Okay, David.
Oh, thanks, John. And it's very nice to see you again, and really appreciate the invitation, both to chat today and to be connected with this conference and to meet with you virtually then. I'm here on quite a beautiful day in Adelaide in Australia, on Ghana land. And, in terms of introducing myself, I'm really part of a community of practitioners, narrative practitioners, linked here at Dulwich Centre and internationally. And if I was trying to think about how that sort of came about, when I was a young man, I was really just trying to think how on earth to make sense of some pretty strange aspects of Australian culture, including the harm done by men, my people, by white men. And I was searching everywhere for ways to respond. And it was that sort of social issue that I was trying to grapple with, and men's violence. And it just happened that there was some partnerships happening at Dulwich Centre, so collaborations on the theme of this conference between men and women trying to address men's violence and masculinity. And that was really what then led me to this field of narrative therapy and community work, and through work in prisons originally. But it was this idea that there could be partnerships, could be collaborations across differences, to respond to particular social issues and social sufferings. So, that was actually how I came to be into this field, and I found great meaning and company in those collaborations, and trying to respond to different hardships. So it's a bit of a slightly unconventional way of coming into the field of therapy or community work, but that's how it sort of started, and it's where I still am. So I guess that's how I'd introduce myself, here on a land far from yours, but linked through histories, both pretty terrible and lots of good things too.
Okay. So how what kind of bits of that might you be thinking about talking about the conference? I guess I'm aware, and maybe it's worth mentioning for colleagues in the UK and so on who might be attending the conferences. I mean, what you haven't said in the last few minutes, which is the huge scope of your work, which has been international, working in Palestine and Rwanda and many other places that have been, terribly affected by genocide and trauma and so forth. And your kind of wonderful capacity to bring kind of different ways of knowing into community work and therapies, such as images such as the tree of life, but also kind of things that not many therapists think about, which is sport, like games and football and cricket and things like that, bringing all that in. And also, from my perspective, you're, as somebody who's followed your career for a long time, the kind of more recent stuff about developing a research tradition for narrative and community practice, and then the more recent papers that you seem to be churning out at a pace that are kind of sort of reviews, but, kind of like interesting and personal reviews of issues such as the relevance in neuroscience and moral injury and so forth. So I guess I was just aware there's so much you could be talking to us about in June at the conference. So what's your thoughts at the moment around what you might want to say?
Well, my first thought's one of appreciation for your retelling of some of those things I've been involved in. I really appreciate those descriptions. And I think what I might try to focus on at the conference, because the theme's around collaboration, there was one particular aspect of narrative practice that I think has really assisted me in terms of collaborations. And it started actually way back when I was in the prisons, when I realized that the people I was meeting with, while we were having good conversations, and these were men from very different experiences of life than me, I realized that actually they really wanted to be talking to, in some way, the young people back in their communities. And I realized I could actually enable people to speak through me, not just to me. So I think I might talk a little bit about that principle, because it's meant that I can have a role where I can use my skills, but I'm quite decentered in generating know-how, stories of survival, or skills, ways that people have dealt with certain issues. And then they can think about who would be most meaningful for them to contribute to, and I can be like a conduit for that. And the people don't even meet necessarily, but it's a particular form of collaboration, I think, that has been very significant to me. And it's meant that, particularly in some of those contexts of great harm that you have spoken about, finding some way that people, even when they're enduring great hardship, can make a contribution to somebody else, and that my role can be to try and facilitate that. That's just opened different possibilities for collaboration, I think. So I think that might be one thing I'll talk about, if that sounds okay. Open to feedback. And then, yes, maybe something also about aspects of the other thing that's been significant when being invited to work in different contexts, including different cultural contexts or different socio-political contexts. The ways of working in one place really don't necessarily fit at all in another. So it's been quite invigorating to collaborate with people and think, well, what would be resonant in this context? And that's often involved looking at the local folk culture, looking at what are people finding significant there. And it can be like really ordinary things, like you mentioned, football. So in a refugee camp in the north of Uganda, we were asked, a team of us was asked to think, how could we support some work there? The young people were playing football and playing it with such verve and delight that it meant somehow the problems of memory for them were not present in those moments. And so it was like, okay, well, how can we adjust our work and use this as a starting point? Which was a bit similar with Nazelo Nkube Malilo in relation to the tree of life. So I might talk a bit about how those collaborative, cross-cultural creations can happen. And it's often about honouring local folk culture as its starting point. So Michael White in the field of narrative therapy and yourself have talked about narrative psychology and folk psychology and honouring local understandings. And I'm really interested in building on that and thinking, okay, what aspects of local folk culture can also be starting points for practice and for collaborations. So yeah, I thought maybe those two realms, and that opens us up to our sort of artistic practice also. So maybe there'll be a chance for some song or some other aspect of practice, because I think when we're honouring how people have endured hardship, realms of the arts also become really relevant. Our practice doesn't have to be separate from those sorts of considerations. So yeah, those sorts of things. I thought, John, if that's okay, and with a bit of an emphasis also on what sort of partnerships can make possible, because that's what drew me to this work in the first place, and they're very, very meaningful to me. So yeah, those were some of the things, but I'm very open to ideas, because anything else, I'm also happy to.
No, David, these are great things. These are already. I'm kind of imagining how these kind of practices and ideas and stories and so on will kind of connect with people in our pluralistic community. There's so many points of connection, and also, here's a different way of doing it. Here's some different ideas that come from the narrative tradition in your own work. So that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to hearing you talking about all this, and who knows, possibly also having a little sing-song in the whole.
Let's do it. But I look forward to it too, John, and very much those conversations across differences, and it'd be really, really interesting to hear what the points of resonance are and any points of dissonance. I'm really open to them too, so it'd be great.
Okay, let's finish there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.